For 30 years, Johnny Carson was more than just a host. He was the ultimate gatekeeper to American living rooms, bringing the nation's biggest stars to audiences across the country. His warm smile and easy laugh made viewers feel like they were watching old friends catch up over coffee. It was a carefully crafted illusion that made The Tonight Show the pinnacle of late-night television. But when the camera stopped rolling and the audience went home, Carson's famous smile often disappeared. According to those closest to him, America's favorite host kept a mental blacklist of guests he considered truly terrible human beings. Carson was the ultimate professional on camera, but the minute they cut to commercial, he would sometimes turn to Ed McMahon and whisper, "That person should never be near a camera or a child." In his final years, Carson became increasingly candid about the celebrities he had secretly despised throughout his career. The stories he told close friends painted a disturbing picture of beloved icons who were monsters behind their carefully crafted public images. These weren't just difficult personalities or demanding stars. According to Carson, these were genuinely dark people hiding behind fame and talent predators, abusers, and manipulators who the industry protected for decades. Today, we peel back the facade of Hollywood's golden age to reveal Carson's untold blacklist of 9 celebrities whose off-camera behavior led the unflappable host to privately label them as truly evil. The list includes Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Bette Davis, Mickey Rooney, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Shelley Winters, Jane Russell, and Jerry Lewis. We are counting down to the one legendary entertainer Carson called truly hateful, a revelation that shocked even his closest friends. The first name on our list earned her inclusion not through malice, but through raw, unpredictable chaos that made every appearance a terrifying risk. Top 9. Shelley Winters, the volcano of unpredictability. Shelley Winters was a 2-time Oscar winner with a career that spanned decades. She should have been an ideal guest for The Tonight Show, experienced, accomplished, and full of Hollywood stories. In reality, according to those who worked on the show, Winters was one of Carson's most unpredictable and volatile guests. Her segment was a ticking time bomb. "Shell doesn't talk, she detonates," Carson reportedly said after one particularly explosive appearance. Winters became infamous among the show's staff for her unwillingness to adapt to the light, entertainment-focused format of late-night television. Rather than sharing amusing anecdotes, she would often launch into intense political diatribes or deeply personal revelations that left Carson visibly uncomfortable. During one appearance in the mid-1970 seconds, a simple question about a recent film quickly evolved into Winters delivering a 5-minute uninterrupted monologue about government corruption. Carson, a master of controlling conversations, was left struggling to find a way to lightheartedly transition to a commercial. A former director recalled the experience. But with Shelley, it was like trying to steer a tornado. Once she got going, all he could do was wait for her to run out of steam. Winters' unpredictability wasn't limited to her conversational topics. She was also known for physical outbursts. Her reputation for volatility, which included once throwing a glass of whiskey in a fellow guest's face on a British talk show, made Tonight Show staff nervous whenever she was booked. In fact, the staff took precautionary measures. "We would actually remove certain items from the set when we knew she was coming," admitted a former stage manager, adding, "Anything that could be thrown or knocked over would mysteriously disappear before her segments." What distinguished Winters from the others on this list, however, was that her behavior seemed to stem from genuine passion rather than malice or ego. She cared deeply about political and social issues and saw every public appearance as an opportunity to address them, regardless of the venue's appropriateness. Carson, while uncomfortable, maintained a certain respect for her authenticity. After one particularly fiery appearance where she criticized the Vietnam War, he reportedly told his producer, "I may not want a vacation with her, but at least she means every word she says." Nevertheless, Winters' appearances became less frequent in the later years of Carson's tenure, as the host ultimately preferred guests whose style complemented, rather than challenged, the show's format. While Winters challenged the format, the next guest on our list challenged Carson's personal ethics with her extreme political views and intolerance. Top 8. Jane Russell. The political bigotry Carson couldn't stomach. Jane Russell was one of Hollywood's most iconic sex symbols of the 1,940 seconds and 50 seconds. With her striking beauty and significant place in film history, she seemed like a natural recurring guest for The Tonight Show. Yet after a few appearances in the early 1970 seconds, Russell rarely returned to Carson's couch. This absence, according to show insiders, stemmed from Carson's profound discomfort with her increasingly extreme political views and reported poor treatment of LGBTQ+ staff members. While Carson was a moderate Republican for much of his life, he maintained a strict policy of keeping The Tonight Show relatively neutral on divisive political issues. Russell, however, reportedly used backstage interactions to express hardline conservative views that Carson found troubling. A former producer explained, "Johnny could handle guests having different political opinions. What bothered him was when those opinions turned into personal attacks on staff members or other guests." According to several accounts, Russell became notorious for making disparaging comments about LGBTQ+ individuals working on the show. During one appearance in the early 1970 seconds, she allegedly refused to allow a gay makeup artist to touch her face, demanding a replacement. Even more concerning to Carson was a reported incident involving fellow star Rock Hudson. A talent coordinator recalled that Russell refused to be booked on the same episode as Hudson, making derogatory comments about his sexuality. Johnny had many friends in the gay community, including several staff members. The coordinator remembered, adding, "He was ahead of his time in not tolerating that kind of discrimination on his show." Carson's final breaking point allegedly came during a 1973 appearance when Russell made dismissive comments about civil rights legislation during a commercial break. Though her remarks were not picked up on broadcast microphones, they were overheard by several crew members and reportedly reached Carson's ears. After that appearance, Russell was noticeably absent from the guest roster for the remainder of Carson's tenure. This was one of the few clear cases where Carson appears to have personally vetoed future bookings. For Carson, who was generally reluctant to ban guests, especially those with Russell's star power, taking such a definitive stance spoke volumes about how strongly he objected to her behavior. While Russell's bigotry created a permanent rift, the next guest on the list was a master of self-created chaos and logistical despair. Top 7. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the diva, who brought the production to chaos. With her glamorous appearance, distinctive accent, and flirtatious personality, Zsa Zsa Gabor was, ironically, a Tonight Show favorite who appeared dozens of times during Carson's tenure. Viewers saw a charming, over-the-top personality who played up her Hungarian background in many marriages for laughs. Behind the scenes, however, Gabor was one of the most demanding and difficult guests in the show's history. Her outrageous requirements were legendary among staff. Carson reportedly quipped after a particularly exhausting appearance, "I'd rather interview a cat. At least the cat wouldn't need 3 assistants in special lighting." Gabor's demands began long before she even arrived. Her standard requirements included a specific dressing room temperature, precisely 74 degrees Fahrenheit. She required fresh flowers, specifying orchids only, no carnations. And for her water, she stipulated a bottle of Perrier with exactly 3 ice cubes. Her list was so extensive, it even included the demand for her own lighting technician, flown in at the show's expense, and that no female guests younger than 40 be booked on the same episode. A former talent coordinator recalled that her writer read like a parody of celebrity demands. When these specific requirements weren't met exactly, Gabor would reportedly refuse to leave her dressing room, often delaying the taping and throwing off the entire show's schedule. One infamous incident occurred when she discovered the makeup department didn't have her preferred brand of foundation. According to witnesses, she got into a shouting match with the head makeup artist, demanding someone be sent to Beverly Hills immediately to purchase the correct product. This time, Carson had to intervene personally. A former producer remembered him calling her and saying, "Zsa, honey, you look beautiful already and we have a show to do. Let's save the cosmetics emergency for another day." What particularly irked Carson was how her diva behavior affected the overall production, causing chaos and keeping other guests and the crew waiting. Despite these frustrations, Gabor continued to appear due to her undeniable entertainment value when the cameras finally rolled. However, her self-aggrandizing behavior was matched only by the next guest, an artistic genius whose colossal ego made him believe that the rules of television simply didn't apply. Top 6. Orson Welles, the genius who believed rules were beneath him. Orson Welles appeared on The Tonight Show multiple times during the Carson era, always generating memorable television with his booming voice and larger-than-life presence. Viewers at home saw a charming, brilliant raconteur. Carson and his staff, however, saw something else. a man whose ego had grown so enormous that he believed the normal rules of television simply didn't apply to him. "Never again," Carson reportedly said after one particularly difficult Wells appearance. "That guy thinks he's still running Rome." The problems typically began before Wells even arrived at the studio. According to Tonight Show writers, Wells routinely dismissed any prepared questions or topics Carson's team had developed. One former writer recalled, "He told us our questions were pedestrian and obvious. He literally crossed them all out and handed back an empty page." This put Carson in the uncomfortable position of having to interview one of cinema's most significant figures with no preparation or framework. A particular challenge was Wells's tendency to launch into lengthy, meandering stories that were difficult to edit for time. During one appearance in the mid-1970 seconds, Wells was scheduled for a 7-minute segment, but stayed on the couch for nearly 25 minutes. He ignored multiple subtle cues from Carson that it was time to wrap up, leading the staff to have to bump 2 other guests entirely. Wells's behavior towards staff was equally dismissive. He reportedly refused to speak directly to production assistants, instead addressing them in the third person, even when they were standing right beside him. Staff heard him say things like, "Tell the girl I need more water," or "Ask the boy to adjust the light." What particularly irritated Carson was Wells's habit of treating The Tonight Show as if it were his own personal platform rather than Carson's program. Orson would bring props, change topics without warning, and even attempt to direct camera shots from his seat. A former producer explained, "He once actually stood up and tried to tell our camera operators which angles to use." Johnny was livid. After one challenging appearance, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. Being brilliant doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's show." Though Carson maintained public respect for Wells's immense contributions to film, privately he began to view him as a cautionary tale of what happens when talent is eclipsed by ego. While Wells presented the challenge of an oversized ego, the next celebrity on the list brought a personality that was abrasive, cruel, and verbally violent. Top 5. Bette Davis, the queen of verbal cruelty. When Bette Davis appeared on The Tonight Show, audiences saw the legendary actress at her most engaging, telling witty stories in her distinctive voice and filled with fascinating Hollywood history. What they didn't see were the moments before and after the red light came on, when Davis reportedly revealed a personality so abrasive that even the unflappable Carson was taken aback. "She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom," Carson allegedly told Ed McMahon after one particularly difficult appearance. No one should have to be cross-examined by Bette Davis without a lawyer present. Davis's first offense, according to multiple staff accounts, was her treatment of other guests. When booked on episodes with multiple celebrities, Davis would often interrupt or talk over them, especially if they were younger performers or women. She would physically turn her back on other guests on the couch. A former talent coordinator recalled, "If someone else was telling a story that got laughs, you could see her seething, planning how to regain control." Behind the scenes, Davis's behavior was even more problematic. She reportedly demanded whiskey in her dressing room before appearances, and her alcohol consumption sometimes led to inappropriate comments and behavior. According to female staff members, Davis regularly used sexist and racist language that shocked even by the standards of that time. One makeup artist recalled Davis refusing her services, asking instead for someone whose hands don't shake like they're coming off a 3-day drunk. Carson, who generally avoided confrontation, made a rare exception for Davis when she began berating a cue card holder for being too slow during a rehearsal. A production assistant who witnessed the incident remembered Johnny actually stepped in. He very quietly told her, "Miss Davis, on this show we speak to everyone with respect or we don't speak at all." She was stunned, probably not used to being challenged, but she backed down. What made Davis particularly difficult was the contrast between her undeniable talent. Carson admired her work and her cruelty to others. After her final appearance in the early 1980 seconds, Carson reportedly told his producer, "That's the last time. Life's too short to spend it being verbally flogged by Bette Davis, no matter how many Oscars she has." While Davis directed her barbs at adults, the next guest's inappropriate behavior was directed toward young women in a way that crossed clear professional boundaries. Top 4. Mickey Rooney, the wandering hands and inappropriate behavior. Mickey Rooney was Hollywood royalty, the #1 box office star from 1939 to 1941, and a living connection to the industry's golden age. His appearances on The Tonight Show should have been nostalgic celebrations of an illustrious career. Instead, according to multiple staff accounts, Rooney's visits became notorious for his inappropriate behavior, chaotic energy, and occasional intoxication. Rooney, then in his mid-50 seconds during the problematic 1,970 seconds appearances, developed a troubling reputation among female staff members for unwanted touching, suggestive comments, and ignoring professional boundaries. He thinks being short gives him license to be a pervert, Carson reportedly told his producer after one particularly problematic appearance in the mid-1,970 seconds. According to multiple accounts, young production assistants would ask to be reassigned when they learned Rooney was booked. A former assistant from the late 1,970 seconds recalled his technique. He would grab your hand when you brought him water, try to pull you closer, ask if you were married. She added, if you tried to leave, he'd hold on to your wrist just a little too long. Even more concerning was Rooney's apparent inability to recognize when he'd had too much to drink. He appeared visibly intoxicated during at least 3 separate appearances, slurring words and losing his train of thought mid-sentence. During one infamous segment in 1977, Rooney began telling an anecdote about Judy Garland that quickly became inappropriate, forcing Carson to cut him off and pivot to a different topic. During the commercial break, Carson reportedly asked his producer, "Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now?" What made Rooney particularly difficult for Carson was the generational gap in understanding professional conduct. Rooney came from an era of Hollywood where certain conduct toward women was commonplace. After one appearance where Rooney made repeated comments about a young actress also appearing that night, Carson took the unusual step of apologizing to her personally after the taping. A director recalled, "I've never seen Johnny so embarrassed by a guest's behavior," Carson told the actress. "That's not how professionals act on my show, and it won't happen again." True to his word, Rooney's appearances became less frequent in the late 1,970 seconds and early 1,980 seconds, with Carson reportedly insisting on daytime pre-tapings rather than live evening broadcasts when Rooney was booked. While Rooney's behavior created uncomfortable situations, the next guest on the list used his immense cultural power to actively intimidate and belittle the production staff. Top 3. Frank Sinatra, the charming, bully, and intimidation. On screen, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson appeared to share a cordial, even friendly relationship. The legendary singer would joke, tell stories, and occasionally perform, while Carson played the respectful host. Behind the scenes, however, Carson reportedly harbored a deep dislike for Sinatra. It wasn't for his talent, which Carson respected, but for how Old Blue Eyes treated people when he thought no one important was watching. If he didn't sing, he'd be a mob enforcer, Carson once told a friend, according to multiple biographies, adding, "And sometimes, I think he was both." Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show were notorious among crew members for the tension they created. He would arrive with an entourage of up to 8 men described as not show business types, more like guys you wouldn't want to meet in an alley. These men would spread through the studio, watching staff and creating an atmosphere one cameraman described as like being under surveillance. But what truly disturbed Carson was witnessing how Sinatra treated people he deemed beneath him. During one appearance in the early 1,970 seconds, a floor manager made the mistake of giving Sinatra the standard 3 minutes warning before his segment. According to several witnesses, Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close, saying, "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran in his 50 seconds, was visibly shaken afterward. Carson saw this interaction from his office monitor and nearly canceled the segment. The most revealing moment came during a commercial break when Sinatra made a disparaging comment about a female staff member's appearance, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Carson, breaking his usual professional detachment, coldly responded, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." The tension was palpable, with Sinatra visibly surprised that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would challenge him. After that appearance, Carson reportedly told his producer, "I don't care what his ratings are, limit him to once a year maximum." For Carson to restrict Sinatra's appearances spoke volumes about his personal distaste for the singer's bullying behavior. While Sinatra was an open bully, the next guest was a master of performance, a beloved icon whose transformation into a cold-blooded monster the moment cameras cut was truly chilling. Top 2. Joan Crawford, the calculating monster behind the mask. When Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, viewers saw the gracious Hollywood legend they had admired for decades. With her perfect posture, immaculate appearance, and practiced charm, Crawford embodied old Hollywood glamour. But according to multiple Tonight Show staff members, Crawford's off-camera behavior revealed a very different person. "She was one of the coldest people I've ever interviewed," Carson reportedly told his biographer years later, comparing the experience to talking to a beautiful statue with nothing inside. Crawford's appearance began causing problems before she even arrived. Her demands included specific lighting requirements so detailed that the show's technical director still had the 4-page memo in his files decades later. Everything had to be precise. The angle of her chair, the height of Johnny's desk, and even the studio temperature exactly 67 degrees F, not 66, not 68. What truly revealed Crawford's character was how differently she treated people based on their importance. A stagehand recalled that she practically curtsied to Johnny. However, when a young 20-year-old production assistant accidentally entered her dressing room with water she had requested, Crawford exploded. According to multiple witnesses, Crawford launched into a tirade so vicious that staff members in the hallway froze in shock. She allegedly called the assistant a brainless little and suggested she find work at a brothel where incompetence might be an asset. The young woman fled in tears, and Crawford demanded she be fired. The most disturbing aspect of her appearance wasn't just her treatment of staff, it was the calculating way she transformed the moment cameras turned on. She was like a machine pretending to be a woman, one producer recalled. She had rehearsed every answer, every laugh, and every spontaneous moment. Nothing was real. During commercial breaks, Crawford would immediately drop her smile and sit in stone-faced silence, only to instantly reanimate when the red light returned. Carson struggled to find any authentic connection with Crawford. After the show, he reportedly told Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Christina Crawford's memoir, Mommy Dearest, revealed Joan's alleged abuse of her adopted children, Carson wasn't surprised. He simply nodded and said, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." While Crawford's calculation unnerved Carson, his final and perhaps most intense dislike was reserved for a comedian whose public persona and private cruelty were reportedly worlds apart. Top 1. Jerry Lewis, the truly hateful humanitarian. Jerry Lewis was one of America's most successful entertainers. He was a groundbreaking comedian, actor, director, and humanitarian known for his annual telethons benefiting muscular dystrophy research. His manic energy and physical comedy had made him a global star. Behind the scenes, however, Lewis was also one of the most difficult, demeaning celebrities in Hollywood, a reputation that earned him a special place on Carson's personal blacklist. "He's what happens when ego outruns talent," Carson reportedly told a colleague after a particularly troublesome Lewis appearance in the mid-1970 seconds. Unlike some difficult guests who saved their worst behavior for underlings, Lewis reportedly made no secret of his disdain for Carson himself. During one infamous appearance, Lewis repeatedly talked over Carson, hijacked questions intended for other guests, and at one point actually reached over and adjusted Carson's tie without permission. This visibly annoyed the normally unflappable host. A former producer explained that it was a well-known rule. You don't touch Johnny unless he initiates it. Lewis knew this and allegedly did it anyway as a power move. Lewis's treatment of crew members was allegedly even worse. He would refuse to learn staffers' names, referring to them as, "Hey, you," or by their function, "camera guy," "makeup," "girl," regardless of their experience or seniority. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when a camera operator reportedly coughed quietly during Lewis's rehearsal. Lewis stopped everything and launched into a tirade, screaming that the cameraman was a professional who breathes like an amateur and demanding he be removed. A floor manager confirmed, Jerry screamed at a camera op for breathing loudly. Not talking, breathing. The poor guy had allergies. What Carson found most objectionable about Lewis was the stark contrast between his public persona as a tireless champion for children and his private behavior toward people who couldn't benefit his career. The Jekyll and Hyde routine made Johnny's skin crawl, recalled a producer who worked closely with Carson. He'd watch Jerry cry on his telethon about loving children, then come to our show and treat people like they were subhuman. After Lewis's final appearance on The Tonight Show in the early 1980 seconds, Carson reportedly told his executive producer simply, "Never again." Though Carson rarely banned guests outright, Lewis joined the small group of celebrities who were effectively blacklisted from the show during its final decade. Years later, when asked about Lewis at a private dinner, Carson reportedly said something that shocked those present with its uncharacteristic harshness. "In a town full of phonies, he stands out as truly hateful, and that takes some doing." Johnny Carson's private feelings about these 9 difficult guests, Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Bette Davis, Mickey Rooney, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Shelley Winters, Jane Russell, and Jerry Lewis offer a rare, unfiltered glimpse into Hollywood's reality behind the facade of glamour and charm. For 30 years, every major star had to go through Carson to reach the American public, and he knew who was genuine and who was faking it. Carson had nothing to gain by criticizing these celebrities. He simply wanted every interview to go smoothly. When he disliked someone, it was because they had made it impossible not to. Perhaps most revealing is how Carson distinguished between guests who were merely difficult and those he considered truly problematic. He tolerated eccentricity, nervousness, and moderate ego. Understanding these came with fame. What he couldn't abide was cruelty, especially toward those with less power. His longtime director recalled Carson's simple test. How did they treat the pages, the assistants, the guys working the cameras? That told him everything he needed to know about someone's character. Carson's assessments have been validated over time by broader revelations. Christina Crawford's allegations about her mother, Joan, reports of Sinatra's connections to organized crime, and stories of Mickey Rooney's inappropriate behavior have all been corroborated. This suggests Carson wasn't just being judgmental. He was recognizing genuine character flaws that Hollywood's publicity machine worked overtime to conceal from the public. The most sobering aspect of Carson's blacklist is how effectively the studio system protected these celebrities, despite their behavior being known to industry insiders. Back then, stars could maintain pristine public images while behaving abominably in private, secure in the knowledge that studios and networks had vested interests in maintaining their marketability. A former writer observed, "Today, one cell phone video could end a career. Back then, someone could throw a chair at an assistant, and as long as they sold tickets, the story would never leave the building." Johnny used to say, "The camera doesn't just add 10 pounds, it adds a layer of fiction," recalled his longtime producer. Carson's greatest skill wasn't just interviewing people, it was seeing through that fiction to the truth underneath.